The blade stopped 3 millimeters from the child's throat. Captain Marcus Chen held position, arm extended, weapon steady. His pulse didn't quicken. His breathing remained measured. The Vraxi princess, barely 4 cycles old by their measurement, stared up at him with 6 crystalline eyes that reflected the emergency lighting in fractured patterns across the throne room walls. "Please," she whispered in perfect standard. "Please don't." The Queen Mother sat motionless on her dais, surrounded by her honor guard. Their weapons remained holstered. Protocol demanded they fire. Protocol demanded they protect the bloodline at any cost. But the Queen Mother's primary hand remained raised, fingers spread in the gesture that meant observe and wait. Marcus understood why. The child wasn't supposed to be here. The evacuation pods had launched 40 minutes ago, carrying the royal family to the sanctuary stations beyond the asteroid field. Intelligence confirmed their departure. Satellite imagery verified empty palace corridors. Every scan, every sensor, every piece of data said this room should contain only the Queen Mother and her chosen guard, the 12 who volunteered to stay behind and ensure the detonation sequence completed without interference. Yet here stood a child in royal vestments, having emerged from behind a decorative column the moment Marcus entered the chamber. "Captain Chen?" the Queen Mother said. Her voice carried the harmonic resonance of her species, each word layered with sub-frequencies that human ears could barely distinguish. "You were briefed on the parameters of this mission." "Yes, Your Majesty." Marcus didn't lower the blade, didn't shift his stance. "Secure the throne room, prevent interference with the detonation, eliminate all hostile contacts." "And is my daughter hostile?" Beyond the reinforced windows, the city burned. Striker-class warships carved through the atmosphere, their weapons reducing civilian sectors to molten slag. The Krath Empire didn't take prisoners, didn't negotiate terms. They conquered or they annihilated, and they'd already made their preference clear. 3 billion Vraxi remained on the planet's surface. Too many to evacuate, too scattered to shield. The Queen Mother had made her choice 6 hours ago when the enemy fleet breached the outer defenses. She'd armed the planetary core with enough antimatter to crack the mantle, enough destructive force to take 40% of the Krath invasion force with them when this world died. The detonation was set for 17 minutes. "She's a child in a restricted military zone," Marcus said. "How she got here is secondary to what she represents." "And what does she represent, Captain?" "A complication. A complication." Her smallest hands clutched at the ceremonial sash across her chest, while her larger limbs remained perfectly still, following the training that noble children received from hatching. Don't run from predators. Don't show fear. Movement triggers pursuit. She'd learned her lessons well. Marcus had learned his lessons too. 23 years in the Terran Defense Corps, 14 campaigns across 9 systems. He'd stood in burning cities before. He'd held position while civilians screamed. He'd followed orders that tasted like ash and felt like betrayal, because orders were the spine that kept humanity standing when everything else collapsed. But he'd never held a blade to a child's throat while their mother watched. "Intelligence confirmed your evacuation," he said, addressing the Queen directly while keeping his eyes on the princess. Every member of the royal bloodline was accounted for. The Queen Mother's tone remained neutral, but something shifted in her posture, a subtle relaxation of her secondary shoulders. "My youngest daughter suffers from a neural condition that makes pod travel lethal. The acceleration would rupture her cerebral vessels before we cleared the atmosphere." "You lied to command." "I omitted information that would have changed nothing except to burden you with knowledge of her fate." Marcus processed that. Processed the implications. The Queen Mother had stayed behind knowing her daughter would die here, had volunteered for this final duty while sending the rest of her bloodline to safety. The honor guards surrounding her hadn't chosen this post out of loyalty alone. They'd chosen it because someone needed to ensure the child didn't die alone in the explosion. They'd chosen it to give her those final 17 minutes with her mother. "The Krath will reach this level in 8 minutes, Marcus said. Maybe less if they breach the eastern shaft. When they do, they'll try to stop the detonation." "Which is why you're here, Captain. Your species has a reputation for seeing missions through to completion." "We do." "Then complete your mission. My daughter poses no threat to the detonation sequence. She cannot stop what has already begun. But if you determine that protocol requires her death before the Krath arrive, then I will not stop you." The Queen Mother's voice carried no emotion now, just the flat certainty of someone who'd already accepted every possible outcome. "I ask only that you make it quick." The princess's eyes never left Marcus's face. She didn't beg again, didn't cry or plead or try to run. She simply stood there, waiting for him to decide if she had 16 more minutes with her mother, or if she died right now. His blade didn't waver. His hand didn't shake, but something in his chest felt like it was tearing itself apart. "Lower your weapon, Captain." The voice came from the doorway, sharp and commanding. Marcus didn't turn. Didn't need to. He recognized Lieutenant Sarah Venn's cadence even through the distortion of her combat helmet. "You're supposed to be at the secondary checkpoint," Marcus said. "Secondary checkpoint's gone." Kraft punched through the maintenance corridor and vented everything from sub-level 12 to 18. We fell back to establish a new perimeter. Her boots clicked against the polished floor as she moved into the room, weapon raised and scanning the honor guard. "But right now I'm more concerned with whatever the hell you think you're doing, not to execute children. My orders were to eliminate hostile contacts, then eliminate the Kraft. Not a terrified kid who's clearly zero threat to mission success." Marcus felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders, the same weight he'd carried through every impossible decision that war demanded, every choice between protocols and principles. Every moment when the textbook answer felt wrong but the alternative felt worse, the Queen Mother remained silent, watching this exchange with the patience of someone who'd navigated court politics for 3 decades. The honor guard maintained their positions, weapons still holstered. They'd follow their queen's lead. If she gave the signal, they'd open fire and accept Marcus's response. If she stayed quiet, they'd wait. Everything hinged on his next move. "The detonation will kill her anyway," Marcus said. 15 minutes in this entire sector becomes plasma. What difference does 60 seconds make? The difference between dying in an explosion and dying on a sword. Venn moved closer, positioning herself between Marcus and the child. The difference between a soldier and a murderer. "We're all murderers today, Lieutenant. 3 billion souls are about to die on this planet." The Kraft. The Vraxi who couldn't evacuate. Every living thing in a 10,000-kilometer radius. What's one more name on that list? The name that you'll have to carry. Not command. Not the politicians who signed off on this operation. You. Venn's voice dropped lower, meant only for him despite the room's acoustics. "I've seen what that weight does to people, Captain. I've watched good soldiers eat their sidearms because they couldn't sleep without seeing the faces. Don't add this one to your collection." The princess shifted slightly, her smallest hands tightening on her sash. Such a small movement. Such a human gesture despite her alien physiology. Fear looked the same across species. Desperation felt universal. "The mission parameters were clear," Marcus said. "No complications, no deviations. Then treat her like what she is. A non-combatant in a secured area. She's not stopping the detonation. She's not calling reinforcements. She's just a child waiting to die with her mother." Venn paused, letting that sink in. Let her have that much. Marcus ran the calculations. Tactical assessment said eliminate the variable, remove the uncertainty, follow the protocol that had kept him alive through 14 campaigns. But tactical assessment didn't account for the weight in his chest, didn't measure the cost of certain actions. Didn't calculate the price of looking in a mirror afterward. The blade remained steady. The princess remained still. The Queen Mother finally spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that the translator rendered as resignation. "Captain Chen, I have led my people for 31 cycles. I have made decisions that saved millions and decisions that doomed millions more. I have weighed lives against lives and futures against futures until the scales themselves seemed meaningless." Her 6 eyes fixed on him with an intensity that felt physical. "But in all those cycles, I never asked another being to murder my child while I watched. If your protocol demands her death, then I accept the necessity. But know that I will remember your name when I cross into the next realm. I will carry it with me, and I will ensure the universe knows what humanity required of its soldiers this day." The threat wasn't subtle. The Queen Mother commanded respect across 7 systems. Her words carried weight in councils and assemblies. If she lived long enough to transmit a final message, and the Vraxi had protocols for that, had dead man switches and quantum-entangled archives that would preserve her testimony, then humanity's reputation would carry this stain forever. Marcus understood leverage when he heard it. He also understood something else. "You wanted me to hesitate?" he said quietly. "From the moment I entered this room, you've been testing me." The Queen Mother's expression didn't change, but her secondary shoulders shifted fractionally. "Acknowledgement without admission. The Vraxi respect strength," Marcus continued. "But you respect wisdom more. You wanted to see if humanity could distinguish between necessary violence and cruelty." Between following orders and following them blindly, he finally lowered the blade, the movement slow and deliberate. This was never about whether I'd kill your daughter. It was about whether I'd question the order to do so. And do you question it, Captain? Every day? Marcus Mag locked the blade to his armor and stepped back. Every single day I question what this war has turned us into, but questioning and refusing are different things. I lowered my weapon because tactically she's irrelevant, not because I suddenly developed a conscience. I see. The Queen Mother rose from her throne, moving with the grace that came from a lifetime of ceremonial practice. Then you are exactly what this moment requires. A soldier who understands the difference between duty and atrocity, even if he cannot always avoid one or the other. She descended the dais steps and moved past Marcus without hesitation, trusting that he wouldn't strike her down from behind. The honor guard remained frozen, waiting for orders that never came. The Queen Mother knelt beside her daughter and wrapped her in an embrace that involved 6 arms and a tenderness that transcended species. "Thank you, Captain," she whispered, "for giving us these final minutes." Marcus nodded once and turned toward Ven. "Status on the Krath Advance?" "They've reached sub-level 22, heavy resistance at the choke points, but they're pushing through. Maybe 10 minutes before they hit this level. Then we establish defensive positions." Standard protocols. Nobody gets through this door until the detonation completes. Understood. Ven moved toward the entrance, already signaling their remaining squad members to converge on the throne room. Marcus took one last look at the Queen Mother and her daughter. They sat together on the floor now, speaking in the musical language of the Vraxi, sharing words that the translator didn't bother to process. Private moments. Sacred moments. The kind of moments that made all the strategic brilliance and tactical planning feel hollow. 14 minutes remained on the detonation clock. Marcus positioned himself at the doorway and checked his ammunition count. Full load. Enough to hold this position against standard infantry for approximately 8 minutes if they came in waves. Maybe 12 if he got lucky. It would be enough. It had to be enough. The Krath hit them like a tsunami. Marcus registered the first contact on his motion tracker. 16 signatures moving fast through the eastern corridor, combat armor reading hot enough to suggest heavy weapons loadout. He signaled Ven to take the left flank while he anchored the right, both of them using the throne room entrance as a natural choke point. The first Krath soldier rounded the corner at full sprint, plasma rifle already firing. Marcus dropped him with 2 shots to center mass, the armor-piercing rounds punching through shields and carapace in a spray of blue-gray blood. The body hadn't hit the floor before 3 more took his place. Ven's rifle chattered in controlled bursts, each squeeze of her trigger dropping another attacker. The Krath weren't subtle fighters. They didn't use cover effectively, didn't employ suppression tactics, didn't do anything except push forward with the absolute certainty that their numbers would eventually win. Against most opponents, that strategy worked. Against humans who'd chosen to die holding a position, it just meant they died faster. Marcus burned through his first magazine in 90 seconds. Slapped in a fresh one without breaking his firing rhythm. The bodies piled up in the corridor, creating an obstacle course that forced the Krath to slow down, to climb over their own dead, presenting perfect targets for another 3-round burst. "They're not adapting," Ven shouted over the gunfire. "Just throwing bodies at us." "They don't need to adapt. They just need to last longer than our ammunition." Marcus dropped another Krath, watched 2 more scramble over the corpse. "How much you got left?" 4 magazines. Maybe 5 minutes at this rate? The detonation clock read 9 minutes. Behind them, the Queen Mother continued speaking to her daughter. The words were soft enough that Marcus couldn't hear them over the battle, but he caught the rhythm. A song, maybe? Or a prayer. The Vraxi had both, and they sounded similar to human ears. The honor guard had finally moved, forming a secondary defensive line inside the throne room itself. They carried traditional weapons, energy lances that crackled with coherent plasma, ceremonial blades that probably hadn't seen real combat in generations, but their positioning was perfect, their discipline absolute. If any Krath made it past Marcus and Ven, they'd find themselves facing a wall of veterans who'd trained their entire lives for this moment. Marcus appreciated professionalism wherever he found it. Another wave hit them, bigger this time. The Krath had brought up their heavy troops, soldiers in powered armor carrying weapons that made his rifle look like a child's toy. Ven took a glancing hit to her shoulder, the impact spinning her halfway around before her armor stabilizers compensated. "I'm good," she grunted, already returning fire. Armor held. Marcus shifted his aim to the heavy troops, knowing that standard rounds wouldn't penetrate their shielding. He triggered the underbarrel launcher and sent a high-explosive grenade into the center of their formation. The explosion filled the corridor with smoke and shrapnel, buying them maybe 20 seconds before the survivors regrouped. 20 seconds that felt like 20 years. His tactical display showed the larger battle, floors above and below where human and Vraxi soldiers held their positions against the Krath tide, bleeding the enemy force while the detonation clock counted down. Command had calculated that 70% of the invasion fleet was in atmosphere right now, clustered around population centers and military installations. When the planet's core went critical, the shock wave would cripple their expeditionary force. It would also kill every defender still on the surface. Nobody had volunteered under any illusions about survival. They'd volunteered because someone needed to make sure the craft paid the full price for this invasion. Because sometimes the only way to win was to make victory cost more than the enemy could afford. 7 minutes on the clock. Marcus's second magazine ran dry. He went to his third. His movements automatic now, muscle memory taking over while his conscious mind tracked patterns in the Krath assault. They were getting smarter, using the heavy troops as mobile cover while lighter infantry tried to flank through side passages. Ven caught most of the flankers, but one made it through, firing wildly as he charged the throne room entrance. The honor guard cut him down before Marcus could shift his aim. Energy lances burned through armor like tissue paper, and the Krath soldier's body hit the floor in two pieces that continued twitching for several seconds. "Appreciate the backup," Marcus called over his shoulder. The lead guard, a massive Vraxi whose ceremonial armor was scarred from a dozen previous battles, nodded once. "We protect the bloodline, Captain, even if that protection is measured in minutes rather than years." Something exploded in the corridor above them. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and Marcus felt the floor shudder beneath his feet. The Krath were getting desperate, using demo charges to punch through barriers. They must have figured out what the detonation clock meant. Must have realized they were racing against total annihilation. It made them reckless. Reckless enemies made mistakes. Marcus exploited those mistakes with the cold efficiency of someone who'd learned warfare in the hardest schools humanity could build. Every shot counted. Every burst found its target. He'd started this campaign as a soldier who still hesitated before pulling the trigger. 3 years later, he was a weapon that happened to be shaped like a man. Ven took another hit, this one to her leg. She went down hard, cursing in 3 languages as her armor's medical systems flooded her bloodstream with combat drugs. Marcus moved to cover her position, his rifle sweeping across both approaches now, burning through ammunition at a rate that his tactical computer helpfully calculated would leave him dry in 90 seconds. 5 minutes on the clock. "Get up, Lieutenant," he said quietly. "Need you mobile." Working on it. Ven struggled to her knees, then her feet, using her rifle as a crutch.
"Legs numb but functional."
"I can hold." Didn't doubt it. They fell back into rhythm. 2 soldiers who'd fought together long enough to move like parts of the same organism. Where Marcus aimed high, Ven covered low. Where she reloaded, he maintained fire. They'd done this dance on 6 different worlds, and it always ended the same way, with them standing over enemy corpses, covered in blood and dust, and wondering how they'd survived when everyone else didn't. Today would end differently. Today they'd be the corpses someone else counted. The craft pushed harder, sensing weakness, committing more forces to the throne room approach. Marcus recognized the pattern. They were pulling troops from other sectors, abandoning their broader assault to focus everything on this single position. Command would have called it a tactical victory, forcing the enemy to concentrate their forces where the detonation would catch them. Marcus called it dying slowly instead of quickly. 3 minutes. His rifle clicked empty. He dropped it and drew his sidearm, knowing it was inadequate, but also knowing that adequate didn't matter anymore. The mission was almost complete. The detonation sequence was locked and verified. Nothing the craft did in the next 3 minutes would change the outcome, but those 3 minutes still had to be lived. Marcus fired until his sidearm ran dry, then drew his blade again. The Krath were in the throne room now. Too many to count, too many to stop. The honor guard met them with energy lances and ceremonial blades that proved devastatingly effective in close quarters. Marcus moved through the chaos with practiced efficiency, cutting and stabbing and doing everything possible to keep the enemy away from the Queen Mother and her daughter. Ven fought beside him, her own blade singing as it opened throats and severed limbs. They were past tactics now, past strategy, past anything except raw violence and the stubborn refusal to die before the clock hit 0. 2 minutes. Marcus took a hit to his ribs, felt something crack, kept moving. Another hit to his shoulder, spinning him around, his blade finding a Krath throat purely by instinct. Pain was information. Information could wait. The mission came first. 1 minute. The Queen Mother began to sing. Her voice rose above the battle sounds, filling the throne room with harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate. The The princess joined her, their voices blending in a song that Marcus didn't understand but recognized anyway. A death song. A farewell to the world they'd loved. The honor guard fought harder, buying every second they could, their own voices joining the song between strikes. Marcus found himself humming along without realizing it, his blade moving in time with the rhythm, the whole battle transforming into something that felt almost ceremonial.
That the craft broke.
Finally understood what the countdown meant. Finally realized they were standing at ground zero of an extinction-level event. They tried to retreat, tried to run, tried to scramble back through the corridors they'd fought so hard to reach. Too late. 10 seconds. Marcus stopped fighting and turned toward the Queen Mother. She held her daughter close, their song reaching its crescendo, their voices carrying a beauty that transcended species and circumstance, then moved to stand beside him, her hand finding his in the space between heartbeats. 5 seconds. The throne room fell silent except for the song. 4 seconds. Marcus thought about Earth, about cities he'd never see again and people he'd never saved, and all the ways war had reshaped him into something his younger self wouldn't recognize. 3 seconds. He thought about the child he'd almost killed and the choice he'd made to let her have these final moments with her mother. 2 seconds he thought about whether that choice meant anything at all when they'd all be dead before his next breath. 1 second. The Queen Mother's song ended on a perfect note of absolute peace. 0. The world became light. Marcus opened his eyes to darkness so complete that for several heartbeats he thought he was dead. Then the pain registered, his ribs screaming, his shoulder on fire, his head pounding with a rhythm that suggested severe concussion. Dead people didn't hurt this much, which meant he was alive, which made no sense. He tried to move and discovered that something heavy pinned his legs. His tactical display was dead, his armor's power cells drained or damaged. He worked his hand free and activated his emergency chem light, cracking it to life in a wash of green-white illumination. The throne room looked like something from a nightmare. Structural supports had collapsed, creating a lattice of broken metal and shattered stone. Bodies lay everywhere. Krath soldiers crushed beneath rubble, honor guards who'd died defending their queen. The detonation should have vaporized everything within 10,000 kilometers. Instead, they'd been buried alive. Marcus processed that impossibility while systematically checking his gear. Sidearm gone. Blade still maglocked to his armor, but bent at an angle that suggested it had stopped something heavy from crushing his skull. Radio dead. Medical systems offline. He was trapped in a tomb with no way to call for help and no idea how he'd survived the detonation in the first place. Ven? His voice sounded strange in the absolute quiet. "Lieutenant Ven, if you can hear me, sound off." Silence answered him. Marcus worked at the debris pinning his legs, using his functional arm to lever aside chunks of ceiling. His fingers found something soft and warm. Vraxi flesh, he realized, though he couldn't tell if it belonged to the Queen Mother or her daughter or one of the honor guards. He pulled his hand back instinctively, then forced himself to check for a pulse. Nothing. He continued clearing debris, driven by the same stubborn refusal to give up that had carried him through 14 campaigns. If he was alive, there might be others. If there were others, his duty was to find them, stabilize them, figure out what the hell had happened. The chemlight gave him maybe 6 hours of illumination. He used it carefully, mapping the immediate area and identifying potential paths through the rubble. Most were blocked completely. Some opened onto voids that his chemlight couldn't penetrate. One led toward what might have been the throne room entrance. Marcus started digging in that direction. Time lost, meaning in the darkness. Could have been 20 minutes or 2 hours when he heard the sound, a scraping, followed by a wet cough, followed by a voice he recognized. "Captain? That you with the glow stick?" Then, relief flooded through him, sharp and unexpected. Status? Trapped under about half a ton of ceiling and completely out of morphine, so I'd rate my situation as suboptimal. Another cough. This one bringing up something that sounded liquid. "You got any theories on why we're not radioactive dust? Can you move?" "Not without someone lifting this debris off my chest." "How are you on the strength front?" Marcus evaluated his condition honestly. Cracked ribs, possibly separated shoulder, concussion symptoms that included blurred vision and nausea. "I've been better." That's what I figured. Ven went quiet for a moment, and Marcus heard her breathing change. The rapid, shallow pattern of someone fighting panic. "Cap, level with me? Are we trapped down here until we run out of air, or do you see a way out?" "There's always a way out." "That's not an answer." "That's the only answer I've got right now." Marcus reached the source of her voice and began clearing debris with methodical care. Conserve oxygen. Let me do the heavy lifting, with cracked ribs and one good arm. This is going to go great. Marcus appreciated the sarcasm. It meant Ven was still fighting, still present. He'd seen soldiers give up in situations less desperate than this, seen them close their eyes and just wait for death. Ven wasn't that soldier. Never had been. He cleared enough rubble to see her face, or what was visible behind her cracked visor. Blood streaked her features, but her eyes tracked him with sharp awareness. Definitely concussed. Probably bleeding internally from the way she held herself, but alive and conscious. "I'm going to lift this support beam," Marcus said. "When I do, you've got maybe 3 seconds to pull yourself clear before I lose my grip." "Understand?" 3 seconds. Marcus positioned himself, planted his feet, and lifted with everything he had left. His ribs screamed. His shoulder threatened to dislocate completely. The beam rose 6 inches. Ven dragged herself clear in 2 seconds. Marcus dropped the beam and collapsed beside her, breathing hard through the pain. They lay there in the darkness, 2 soldiers who'd survived something impossible, and neither of them spoke for several minutes. Finally, Ven broke the silence. "The detonation failed. Or succeeded differently than expected," Marcus countered. "We felt something. The whole palace came down. But we're not dead." "The Krath aren't dead. This whole planet should be plasma right now." She struggled into a sitting position, moving like everything hurt. Someone stopped it. Question is who? Marcus considered that. Considered the implications. If someone had aborted the detonation sequence, it meant they'd accessed the throne room. Meant they'd either killed or captured the Queen Mother. Meant the Krath had won after all, and humanity's sacrifice had bought nothing except a collapsed building. Then he heard the singing. Soft at first, barely audible over their breathing. The same harmonics he'd heard before the countdown reached 0. The same voice that had filled the throne room with beauty in those final seconds. The Queen Mother was alive. Marcus forced himself to his feet and followed the sound, Ven limping behind him. They navigated through gaps in the rubble, squeezing through spaces barely wide enough for human frames, following the song deeper into what remained of the throne room. They found her in a pocket of clear space beneath a collapsed archway. The Queen Mother sat against the wall, her ceremonial robes torn and bloody, 3 of her 6 arms hanging at unnatural angles. Her daughter lay across her lap, perfectly still, crystalline eyes closed. The Queen Mother looked up as Marcus approached, and her song faded into silence. "Captain Chen," she said quietly, "I did not expect to see you again, in this life or any other." Marcus knelt before her, his tactical mind cataloging injuries and calculating survival odds. The Queen Mother wouldn't last more than a few hours without medical intervention. The princess... He realized with a sick certainty that the child wasn't breathing. "What happened?" he asked. "Why are we alive?" The Queen Mother's voice carried harmonics of grief so profound that Marcus felt them physically, a weight in his chest that had nothing to do with his injuries. "In those final seconds, when the detonation sequence reached its completion, I accessed the emergency override. I stopped the explosion." Marcus stared at her. "You saved the Krath." "I saved my daughter. The Krath survival was incidental." "Your Majesty." Ven moved forward carefully. "The detonation was our only chance. 3 billion lives traded to stop their invasion. Everything we sacrificed means nothing compared to a mother's love." The Queen Mother's functional arms tightened around her daughter's body. "You would not understand. Your species does not share our neural architecture, our biological imperatives. When a Vraxi mother faces the death of her child, certain chemical processes override rational thought. We call it Crest, the madness that makes us abandon everything for our young." "You doomed your entire species," Marcus said flatly. "The Krath won't stop now. They'll take this world and move to the next. Millions will die because you couldn't let go. I know." The Queen Mother's eyes met his, and he saw absolute certainty there, absolute acceptance. "I know what I have done, Captain. I know the weight of this choice. But in that moment, with her voice joining mine in our death song, I could not bear it. I could not let her die knowing I had the power to stop it." Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, and it had nothing to do with his broken ribs. He thought about the blade he'd held to this child's throat, the calculations he'd run about whether her death mattered, the cold tactical assessment that had treated her life as a variable to be eliminated. He'd been prepared to kill her then. Now she was dead anyway, and the Queen Mother had destroyed everything trying to save her. "How long?" he asked quietly. The Queen Mother understood, 7 minutes after the detonation failed. The collapse brought down the eastern section. A support beam struck her across the chest. She touched her daughter's face with infinite gentleness. I held her as she died. I sang our family song. She told me she loved me, and then she stopped breathing. Ven made a sound that might have been a sob. Marcus felt his own eyes burning, but he blinked the moisture away. This wasn't the time for grief. This was the time for assessment and planning and figuring out what the hell they did next. The Krath, he said. Where are they? They pulled out when the palace started collapsing, likely assuming everyone inside was dead. The Queen Mother shifted slightly, pain flickering across her features. But they will return. They will search the ruins, find survivors, extract whatever intelligence they can. When they discover I still live, they will take me for interrogation. Not if we can get you out of here. There is no out, Captain. Look around you. We are buried beneath 50 meters of rubble with no equipment, no communications, no hope of rescue. My people have evacuated to the sanctuary stations. Your people have withdrawn to the outer colonies. No one knows we survived. No one is coming. Marcus met Ven's eyes and saw his own assessment reflected there. The Queen Mother was right. They were trapped in a tomb with limited oxygen and no realistic chance of digging their way to freedom before the Krath searchers found them. But Marcus hadn't survived 14 campaigns by accepting impossible situations. Your Majesty, he said carefully, you mentioned an emergency override. Does that mean you still have access to palace systems? The Queen Mother's expression shifted fractionally. Limited access. The detonation abort required my personal biometrics and command codes. Why? Because if you can access palace systems, you can access the emergency beacon network. And if you can access the beacon network, you can send a distress signal that both our people will pick up. Assuming the network survived the collapse. Assuming that, yes. The Queen Mother considered this in silence, her daughter's body cradled against her chest. Finally, she nodded. The access terminal was located near the western wall. If it survived, and if we can reach it, I can attempt to establish connection. Then that's our objective. Marcus stood and extended his hand. Can you walk? I can try. They moved through the darkness with the chemlight as their only guide. 3 broken survivors navigating a maze of destruction. The Queen Mother leaned heavily on Marcus, her breathing labored, her injuries bleeding through her torn robes. Ven brought up the rear, her rifle recovered from the rubble and held ready despite her damaged leg. They found the western wall completely collapsed. They found the access terminal buried under 3 meters of stone. They found no way forward and no way back. Marcus stood in the ruins of their last hope and felt the weight of complete failure settle on his shoulders. They'd survived the detonation. They'd survived the collapse. And now they were going to die trapped in the darkness, and the Krath would win by default. Captain. The Queen Mother's voice pulled him from his thoughts. There is one more option. I'm listening. My daughter's body contains biological implants keyed to the royal family's genetic markers. They include a locator beacon designed to help recover bodies after battles or disasters. She hesitated, and Marcus understood why. If we activate the beacon, it will broadcast her position to any Vroxy receiver within 1,000 kilometers. The sanctuary stations will detect it. But so will any Krath forces monitoring our frequencies. They will know we survived. They will send troops to capture us before rescue can arrive. How long until rescue reaches us versus Krath forces? The sanctuary stations are 16 hours away at best speed. The Krath occupation force could have troops here in less than 3. Marcus did the math. 13 hours defending this position with no ammunition, no functional weapons, and injuries that would kill them slowly even if the enemy didn't. The numbers didn't work. The tactical situation was impossible. But impossible situations were what humans did best. Activate the beacon, he said. We'll hold until rescue arrives. Captain, you cannot seriously intend. I've held worse positions with less support. Marcus checked his blade and found it still functional despite the damage. Lieutenant Ven and I will establish a defensive perimeter. Your Majesty, you'll focus on staying alive long enough for your people to extract you. When they arrive, you'll tell them what happened here. You'll make sure this sacrifice meant something. The Queen Mother studied him with an intensity that felt like she was looking straight through his armor into his soul. You are asking me to let you die, buying time I did not earn. I'm asking you to accept the gift and use it well. Marcus met her gaze without flinching. You made your choice to save your daughter. Now let me make mine. For a long moment, the Queen Mother said nothing. Then she bowed her head in the Vraxi gesture of profound respect and carefully laid her daughter's body on the ground. Her functional hands accessed the implants with practiced ease, entering codes and confirming protocols. The beacon activated with a soft pulse of blue light. Somewhere in the darkness, the clock had started again. The Krath arrived in 2 hours and 47 minutes. Marcus heard them before he saw them. The scrape of armor against stone, the hiss of plasma cutters opening new paths through the rubble, the harsh commands barked in their guttural language. He'd used the time to prepare as well as possible, building crude barriers from fallen debris and positioning himself where the Krath would have to funnel through narrow gaps. Ven had taken position on his left flank, her recovered rifle loaded with the last magazine they'd found in the ruins. 30 rounds between them and certain death. It would have to be enough. The Queen Mother sat behind their defensive line, her daughter's body cradled in her arms. She'd stopped bleeding, which meant her body had activated emergency clotting responses. Also meant she was running on borrowed time, her systems consuming resources faster than her metabolism could replace them. She wouldn't survive another 3 hours. The rescue force needed 13. Marcus had done harder math, but not by much. The first Krath soldier appeared in the gap Marcus was watching, a scout, moving carefully, weapons sweeping the darkness. Marcus let him advance 3 steps, then threw the chunk of rubble he'd selected for exactly this purpose. The stone caught the Krath in his faceplate, cracking the seal, and Marcus followed up with his blade, opening the soldier's throat before he could call for backup. 1 down. The body falling alerted the others. Marcus heard the change in their movement patterns, the shift from cautious advance to tactical assault. They knew someone was defending this position now, knew they'd walked into a kill zone. They came anyway. The second wave hit harder, 4 soldiers moving in coordinated pairs, using covering fire to advance through the gap. Then dropped 2 with precise headshots, her marksmanship still perfect despite her injuries. Marcus took the third with his blade, using the confined space to his advantage, making the Krath soldiers' heavier armor a liability instead of an asset. The 4th got through. The Krath leveled his plasma rifle at the Queen Mother, and Marcus moved without thinking. Throwing himself into the line of fire, the plasma bolt caught him in the chest, his armor ablating in a spray of molten composite. The impact threw him backward, his blade slipping from his fingers, his vision graying at the edges. Ven killed the soldier while Marcus was still falling. Cap? She was beside him instantly, her hands checking his wounds with medic efficiency despite her own injuries. Stay with me. Stay focused. Marcus tried to respond and coughed blood instead. The plasma bolt had penetrated his armor, burned through the trauma plate underneath, and done something catastrophic to his chest. He could feel himself dying, the same way he'd felt it twice before in his career, the same recognition of systems failing and time running out. Then, he managed. The position, I've got it. Don't talk. Just breathe. Everything hurt. Marcus tried to assess his tactical situation and found his thoughts fragmenting, his consciousness slipping in and out like a radio signal losing reception. He heard more craft coming, heard Ven's rifle speaking in controlled bursts. Heard the Queen Mother singing again, her voice filling the darkness with harmonics that felt like a lullaby. He thought about Earth, thought about the child he'd almost killed and the choice he'd made to give her those final minutes with her mother, thought about whether any of this mattered when he'd die here and the Krath would keep coming and the universe would spin on without noticing his absence. Captain Chen. She knelt beside him, her daughter's body laid carefully aside, her functional hands pressing against his wound with surprising strength. Your Majesty, he whispered. You should conserve your strength. I am dying, Captain. What does strength matter to me now? Her eyes held his, luminous in the chemlight's glow. But before I die, I would have you understand something. When you held your blade to my daughter's throat, when you made the choice to lower your weapon and grant us those final minutes together, in that moment, you gave me a gift more precious than life itself. Didn't save her. No. But you gave me the chance to hold her as she died, to sing our songs, to tell her everything a mother wishes to say when she knows goodbye is coming. The Queen Mother's harmonics shifted into something Marcus's translator rendered as absolute sincerity. I betrayed everything to save her, and she died anyway. But you, who had no reason to show mercy, gave us those last minutes of grace. That is what I will remember when I cross over. Not the pain, not the loss, but the kindness of the human who chose compassion over protocol. Marcus wanted to tell her that it wasn't kindness, that he'd made a cold tactical calculation and gotten lucky that it aligned with his conscience, that he was a weapon shaped like a man and weapons didn't feel mercy. But the words wouldn't come, and maybe that was better. Maybe it was enough to have made the choice, regardless of why. Ven's rifle went silent. Marcus tried to rise, tried to return to the fight, but his body refused to respond. The Queen Mother pushed him back down gently, her harmonics taking on the quality of a command. "Rest, Captain. You have done enough. The Krath are no longer your concern." Heard Ven's voice raised in challenge, heard the distinctive hum of Raxi energy lances charging. The cavalry had arrived. He let himself slip into darkness, trusting that the universe would sort itself out without him for a while. Marcus woke in a medical bay that smelled of antiseptic and recycled air. His chest felt like someone had set it on fire, then extinguished the flames with broken glass, but the pain was distant, managed by drugs that kept everything at a comfortable remove. He tried to sit up and discovered restraints holding him to the bed. "Easy, Cap." Ven's voice came from his left. "Doctor's orders. You're not cleared for movement yet." Marcus turned his head carefully and found her sitting in a visitor's chair, her leg elevated and wrapped in a medical cast that probably contained enough nanotech to rebuild her entire skeletal system. She looked tired but alive, which made her infinitely better off than most of their squad. "How long?" he asked. 63 hours since the Raxi Rescue Force pulled us out of the rubble. You've been under for 2 of those days while they rebuilt your chest cavity and convinced your lungs to resume normal operation." She paused. "The doctors said you died twice on the operating table." "Lucky 3, then." "Marcus. The Queen Mother didn't make it. Her injuries were too severe. She lasted about 8 hours after the rescue, long enough to give a full testimony to her ministers, then passed in her sleep." Marcus processed that in silence. He'd known it was coming, had seen enough battlefield injuries to recognize when someone was dying by degrees, but knowing didn't make it easier. "What did she tell them?" he asked. "In her testimony?" "Her choice to abort it. Your decision to spare her daughter." "The defense of the throne room." Ven's voice softened. "She took full responsibility for the detonation failure, made it clear that you and I were following orders and that her actions violated every strategic principle that governed the operation. She basically threw herself on the sword to protect humanity's reputation. And the Vraxi Council has chosen to honor her request. Officially, the detonation failed due to technical malfunction, not royal interference. The craft pushed the invasion, we mounted a defense, you and I got trapped in the collapse and held position until rescue arrived. Clean narrative. No complications." Marcus understood what she wasn't saying. The truth that the Queen Mother had doomed billions to save one child would have destroyed her legacy and damaged human-Vraxi relations irreparably. By accepting the lie, both species could maintain the alliance that might still win this war. Politics, even in death, especially in death. "Where is the princess?" he asked. "Her body, I mean." "Her ashes were scattered on one of the sanctuary stations. The Queen Mother's ashes joined hers." Ven hesitated. "There's something else. The Queen Mother left you something in her will. A message sealed for your eyes only. It's waiting in your quarters whenever you're cleared to receive it." Marcus nodded slowly, already dreading whatever final words the Queen Mother had chosen to leave him. Some burden of knowledge or responsibility that would weigh on him for whatever remained of his life, because that's what the dead always did, left the living to carry their weight. "The Krath?" he asked, changing the subject. "Regrouped after the collapse, but they've lost momentum. Without the fear of total planetary destruction, the Vraxi defensive forces have been able to mount proper resistance. The war is far from over, but we're not staring at complete annihilation anymore." Ven's expression darkened. "Command has questions about why you didn't eliminate the princess when you had the chance. Nothing official yet, but there's been discussion. Let them discuss." Marcus closed his eyes, suddenly exhausted despite the medical cocktail keeping him stable. "I made my call. I'll stand by it. Even knowing what it cost?" Marcus thought about the Queen Mother's final words, about the gift of those last minute, about the choice between protocol and compassion and whether it mattered that he'd chosen right for the wrong reasons. "Yeah," he said quietly, even knowing what it cost. Ven stayed with him for another hour, filling the silence with reports and gossip and the comfortable rhythm of 2 soldiers who'd survived together. Eventually the doctors came and chased her out, muttering about rest and recovery protocols. Marcus slept, and dreamed of a child with 6 crystalline eyes singing in a voice that transcended species while the world prepared to end. When he woke again, it was to the news that Command had cleared him of wrongdoing and recommended him for commendation. The official report praised his tactical acumen and defensive capabilities, made no mention of the blade he'd held to a child's throat or the choice he'd made to lower it. Clean narrative. No complications. Marcus accepted the commendation and said nothing about the truth. 3 days later, cleared for light duty but still moving like everything hurt, he accessed the message the Queen Mother had left him. It was audio only, her voice rendered in perfect standard by translators that captured her harmonics as emotional undertones. Captain Chen, if you are hearing this, then I have crossed over to join my daughter in whatever realm awaits us. I don't know if your people believe in an afterlife. I don't know if the universe cares about the choices we made while living. But I wanted you to know that in my final hours, I told my ministers everything, including your moment of mercy. They counseled me to omit this detail, to protect both our species by maintaining a simpler truth. And perhaps they are right. Perhaps the weight of what I did, what we all did, is too heavy for public knowledge. But I wanted one person to know the complete story. One witness who would understand that in the space between holding a blade and lowering it, you gave a dying mother the greatest gift one being can offer another. You gave her time. My daughter died anyway. My choice to save her destroyed everything we fought to protect. But in those final minutes, I held her and sang our songs and told her she was loved. Because of you, Captain. Because you chose mercy when protocol demanded otherwise. I do not ask your forgiveness for betraying our mission. I do not expect you to understand the madness that drives a mother beyond reason. I only ask that you remember this. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer is not victory or success or strategic brilliance. Sometimes it is simply the gift of time. The space to say goodbye. The chance to hold what we love one final time before it slips away. You gave me that, Captain Chen, and I will carry that gift with me into whatever darkness waits. Thank you. The message ended. Marcus sat in silence, processing words that felt simultaneously too heavy and too light for what they carried. He thought about erasing the file, destroying the evidence of the truth that could never be shared. Instead, he saved it in encrypted storage and locked it with codes that would die with him. Some truths needed witnesses. Some gifts deserved remembering, even if, especially if, they came wrapped in failure and regret. Marcus returned to duty 6 weeks later, cleared for combat operations and assigned to a new unit defending the outer colonies. He carried the commendation on his record and the truth in his encrypted files, and the weight of the Queen Mother's final words in his chest, where they'd rebuilt his heart. He fought 13 more campaigns over the next 4 years. He survived all of them, and every time he held a weapon and faced an impossible choice, he thought about a child with 6 crystalline eyes in the space between, holding a blade and lowering it. The war with the Krath eventually ended in negotiated settlement, neither side achieving total victory, both too exhausted to continue fighting. The Raxi rebuilt their worlds. Humanity claimed new colonies. The alliance held, strengthened by shared sacrifice and mutual respect. Captain Marcus Chen retired with full honors and enough medals to cover a dress uniform twice over. He never told anyone about the throne room, about the child he'd almost killed and the mother who destroyed everything trying to save her, about the choice between protocol and compassion and the cost of choosing wrong. But he remembered. On quiet nights when sleep wouldn't come and the weight of 14 campaigns pressed down like gravity, he would decrypt the Queen Mother's message and listen to her voice one more time. And he would tell himself that in a universe of impossible choices and unwinnable wars, he'd made one decision that mattered. He'd given a dying mother time to say goodbye. It hadn't saved anyone, hadn't changed the outcome, hadn't made the universe any kinder or the war any less cruel, but it had been the right choice anyway. And sometimes, Marcus thought as he drifted towards sleep, sometimes that had to be enough.